So a common mistake that I keep seeing for those who are working on SIBO is that the perspective is wrong. They keep saying, I have this small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and so I need to kill the bacteria. You don't need to kill the bacteria. The bacteria that are present in your gut will naturally rebalance when you re-establish proper levels of your internal digestive enzymes. Let's back up. When someone has small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, they are going to be saying, okay, from mouth, esophagus, stomach, and then you go into the small intestine. At that small intestine section, there is too many even bacteria. And these bacteria need to be addressed. They are causing bloating, distension, pain, and indigestion. You're not digesting well. These bacteria are not in their correct position because they should be farther down into the colon. And the colon meaning the larger intestine. So it goes mouth, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, and then later on, large intestine. And in that larger intestine, you'll get a small amount of bacteria that has survived through that entire transit. And then from that point, they will start multiplying and they'll create this positive gut microbiome that is supposed to be helpful. But if from the connection from the small intestine to the large intestine, that barrier, the steps that are necessary to keep these two sections separate, if those barriers have degraded, your bacteria from your larger intestine is going to create backflow. It's going to backflow up, and your bacteria are going to travel up into the small intestine where they get trapped, and that causes small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Editing phase, Matt here. I wanted to add something that did not make the cut the first time, and I did explain it, but my words weren't clear, so I'm refilming. So the small intestine is technically broken up into 3 separate sections. In each separate section, you're going to have its certain role. Interestingly, as you move through each section, you are going to have more allowed bacteria. So the large intestine has the most bacteria. That's where your gut microbiome is and should be. The area in the small intestine that's right before that should have not as many, but it should have let's say a moderate amount of bacteria. And then as you move up, you should have less. And then as you move up again, you should have even less. And there is this gradient that happens between these individual sections. A little bit more moderate, a large amount. Interestingly, and I don't want it to be known as the pH guy, and I'll talk about this maybe in a future video, but the 3 sections in the small intestine, they are going to be dependent on what are the pH levels. And so as you go from the stomach with the stomach acid, and you go into that first section into the small intestine, you're going to have a very acidic environment. And that acidic environment, which will be neutralized by bile salts and other digestive enzymes, which is supposed to happen, but you do have this way of having an environment that is too acidic for these SIBO opportunistic bacteria to survive in. When the small intestine is dysregulated into an area of too high pH, too alkaline, not acid enough, that opens the door for more bacteria to come in and start multiplying. And they will start multiplying because because your stomach acid isn't acidic enough, your stomach isn't acidic enough, then that first section of the small intestine is usually not acidic enough, or it's too basic, too alkaline. And when you eat your food and you get that food that comes all the way down, that underdigested food, because that underdigested food will provide food, not necessarily for you, but for the bacteria. And so that is what causes part of what causes small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And so always, when I'm talking to someone about SIBO or just the topic of SIBO, I will say, is your stomach acid good? Do you exhibit signs of improper stomach acid production and stomach acid flow? And usually I'll find that it's not optimized, or maybe it is fine, but then the bile salts aren't working well, or the pancreatic enzymes aren't working well. And so everyone is individual, because I have never run into a SIBO client or even read a story online where two people have the exact same diet and lifestyle. So there is this personalized approach that does need to happen, which is important, and why you could work with a health practitioner. But you're going to want to pay attention to, am I providing an acidic enough environment for my stomach to lead to an acidic area in that first section of my small intestine, so that it is more difficult for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth microbes to survive, thrive, and continue to cause digestive problems for the host. So back to the regular video. You should, yes, you should have bacteria in your small intestine, but the overgrowth is the problem. There's too many bacteria in the small intestine, and when that happens, you start to get digestive problems such as usually bloating, and then you'll run into like diarrhea, constipation, burping, etc. Furthermore, so that bacteria has been able to go up through the large intestine, backflow into the small intestine, and then you eat again. You keep having meals as you live your life, you have consecutive meals, and you're supposed to. These meals, they come in, and now that there's more bacteria in your small intestine, a larger amount that should not be there, those bacteria now have new food that is feeding it. And so that bacteria will grow in population, and it creates this vicious cycle, because you're like, I have to kill the bacteria in the small intestine, yet I need to keep eating, which is why lower carbohydrate diets do help for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. But it's like putting a Band-Aid on a problem that's not being addressed. What needs to be addressed is the fact that you need to reestablish your body's ability to properly digest the food all the way down, so that as the food travels through your GI tract, your digestive system, the right amount of acids, enzymes, bile salts are happening at the right areas. When you run into a SIBO problem, you run into deficiencies in stomach acid, deficiencies in bile salts, deficiencies in pancreatic enzymes, and the barriers in between each of these sections, mouth, stomach, intestines, there's a problem. There's usually a deficiency somewhere, and when you have something not work for long enough, eventually the organs tilt and they say, I can't keep up anymore. And the bacteria will start flowing in areas that they should not be flowing. When you have correct levels of stomach acid, there is minimal amount of bacteria that gets into the small intestines. When you have that amount of acidity from the small intestines, that triggers proper bile release. That proper bile release will then cause downstream proper pancreatic enzyme release. If these digestive acids, salts, enzymes are not being released in the correct amounts, you leave the door open for dysregulation and digestive problems. And so, instead, what I will usually recommend is a perspective shift. Instead of saying, I need to kill the bacteria that are causing small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, because even if you do, your stomach acid isn't working, your bile salts are too low, and your pancreatic enzymes aren't working. It doesn't make a difference. The bacteria from your large intestine, that barrier still is not good, and it's just going to keep backflowing because your digestive system, it is working, but it's not being supported in a way that is conducive to proper digestion. And so trying to kill these bacteria is trying to address an issue that is too far downstream. And so when someone talks to me about SIBO, I usually try to help encourage a perspective shift. We are not trying to push away bad bacteria. We are trying to go towards proper digestion with optimal stomach acid levels, which will then create a downstream effect of creating proper levels of bile acids, which will then stimulate the pancreatic enzymes and the pancreas all on its own, which will then help all of the food get to the right areas to have proper digestion levels. And please know that when you have the correct environment, bacteria cannot survive in these areas. If you were to release pancreatic enzymes into the small intestine where they should be, and there are enough of those enzymes, your small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, that bacteria should not survive, because there are so many enzymes that are breaking down so much food that the bloating or the distension or the whatever can't happen, because you've taken care to make sure that the food is being digested enough. And so you might say, yeah, but Matt, I'm taking something, I'm taking an ox bile salt, I'm taking these things. Yes, but stomach acid is not just like a Frankenstein version of lemon juice or vinegar or whatever. It has its own specific acidity, and it has its own makeup, as in what are the ingredients that the body requires in order for it to create stomach acid. Stomach acid requires zinc, chloride, so zinc from red meat or other shellfish, other areas of zinc. It requires chloride, so salt. It requires B vitamins. These are the main things that are required in order for you to properly make stomach acid internally. Stomach acid, people usually forget that in order for you to make stomach acid, you actually have to provide the ingredients necessary for the stomach acid to actually exist in your body. If you have a B vitamin deficiency, you are not creating enough stomach acid just because there's not enough. Flat out. And so I will say, what are the ingredients that are required for you to have proper levels of stomach acid, for you to properly, when you eat a food, for there to be enough stomach acid for it to be digested entirely, and to make that acidified food that you've eaten go into the small intestines. And then if that food from the stomach is acidic enough, it will then it'll send an alert, beep, 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 to the gallbladder to release bile. If it is not acidic enough, the bile release will be weaker and you'll get less bile, which means that food is being less digested. And it means that you're introducing undigested food even farther down into the digestive system. Now, what are the ingredients required for you to properly make bile acids? Well, your liver is going to make cholesterol all on its own. That one you don't need to worry about. You can help that cholesterol be produced by eating things that are rich in cholesterol. Cholesterol, in my personal opinion, is good for you. But that's another topic for another day. But bile also requires amino acids and also choline. And interestingly, now that I think about it, choline is a lot in eggs, and eggs also provide cholesterol, which makes me want to say that when you are working on like a fat digestion thing, the inclusion of eggs in that specific concern of fat indigestion is a good idea. So yes, if you don't digest fats well, yes, you want to consume eggs, even though eggs are rich in fat. They're rich in the good fats that help you. It's almost like auto-digesting. You're eating eggs, and the fat that's in the eggs is it's providing choline and it's providing cholesterol, and which will help put them together. It helps make bile, which then breaks down the fats so that as the eggs get into your system, you've already provided the ingredients for the bile to be formed. So eggs help with fat digestion. Anyway, then after comes the pancreatic enzymes. You're going to have pancreatic enzymes are going to require amino acids and B vitamins as well. And so what are the ingredients that you're going to need in order for you to make pancreatic enzymes? You will need protein, because that's what an enzyme is. It is made up of proteins. And in those proteins, you're going to have amino acids. And so when I say you need to have a protein-rich meal in order for you to make proper digestive enzymes, that's what that means. You're bringing in amino acids in order for you to provide the building blocks required for you to make pancreatic enzymes. Next, you're also going to require zinc. You're also going to require B vitamins. And how do we know this? When we go into like nutritional studies, we can observe that there's a link between zinc deficiency and improper stomach acid production. There's a link between zinc deficiency and pancreatic enzyme production. Same thing for B vitamins, same thing for like the salt that's required, the chloride that's required in order for you to make stomach acid. And so these are the types of things that we can deduce. And I'm sure that there are more studies out there, but these are part of the reasons why we know that pancreatic enzymes require certain vitamins and minerals for it to literally be physically made in the body. If you are deficient in these compounds, the food, when it goes from your mouth down the stomach, it's less digested. Then it goes down from the stomach into the small intestines, and it's still not digested enough. And then as it travels through the small intestines, you get this huge load of undigested food that should not be there, and bacteria will then start feeding on it, and you will get digestive distress. By the time that food, because it will eventually make its way through the digestive system, you're not going to be dying because of it. There is still the motor actions that are pushing it through. As that food makes its way down through, your food is going to come out of you under-digested. Not undigested, just not digested enough. Meaning that if you were to do, like, for example, a stool test, you would get undigested food particles in that stool sample. And that would be indicative of you don't have enough enzymes, acids, salts, bile salts to break down the food that you're consuming. And so it is usually not surprising when someone comes and they say, I have, I'm working on SIBO, or I'm working on a digestive problem, and they send over labs, and I look at the labs and there is undigested food that is found in the stool samples. It makes sense. It's a logical conclusion from what is happening in the gut. And so what can you do to help with your digestion? Eat the foods that are required for you to properly make stomach acid, bile salts, pancreatic enzymes. This is the general primer. This concept, these newer perspectives are how I like to approach nutrition and how I like to approach digestion, so that the person feels empowered, instead of pushing away the enemy, we're going towards a goal. That's because once you have the goal in mind, it's easier to work towards that as opposed to continuously trying to avoid the enemy. And so these are usually the perspective shifts that I try to implement when I'm talking to someone that's working on digestion. And I really hope that this primer video was helpful. If you have questions, if you'd like to know more about why and how I use this methodology with a client, let me know in the comment section below. Once again, my name is Matthew Cress of Cress Dietetics, and I want to thank you for watching this primer video on SIBO, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.